All right, so we're diving into some pretty heavy stuff today.
Yeah.
This AP article about the tourist deaths in Laos
Right.
from suspected methanol poisoning.
Yeah.
It's tragic,
Sure.
6 people gone.
Yeah. It's awful.
And while it might seem like, just a freak accident on the surface,
Mm-hmm.
I think we both agree there's got to be a bigger story here.
Oh, for sure. I mean, these types of incidents,
Yeah.
as horrifying as they are, can really act as a magnifying glass, I think, on,
Right.
on larger issues.
Yeah.
We're talking safety standards, we're talking travel awareness, even cultural practices around alcohol.
Right.
It all comes into play.
Yeah, and that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive.
Absolutely.
And you brought this article to us, and I think it's one that we need to dissect thoroughly.
Yeah, definitely.
So we're talking about 6 tourists,
Mm-hmm.
Australians,
Mm-hmm.
British, American, Danish,
Right.
all gone after having drinks at a hostel in Vang Vieng,
Right.
and the suspected cause is methanol poisoning.
Yeah, and that's what's so insidious about methanol. It's
Yeah.
not some far-off chemical.
Right.
It's closely related to ethanol,
Right.
which is the alcohol that we drink,
Of course.
but the effects on the body are night and day.
Right.
So we're talking about severe poisoning,
Wow.
blindness, even death from relatively small amounts.
That's scary.
It is.
So that begs the question, like, why is this even accessible?
Right.
Is this a common problem?
Well,
Or is Laos particularly susceptible to this type of adulteration?
there are a few factors at work here.
Okay.
First, methanol is cheaper to produce than ethanol.
Okay.
So for unscrupulous vendors,
Right.
there's a financial incentive there
Yeah.
to swap it in either intentionally or as a result of sloppy production.
Okay.
Then you have to consider the context. Laos,
Yeah.
like many developing nations, has a history of homemade alcohol production,
Mm.
often unregulated.
Right.
Combine that with a booming tourist industry,
Yeah.
particularly in places like Vang Vieng,
Mhm.
known for its backpacker party scene.
Right. So you've got like this perfect
So
storm.
there's that a recipe for disaster.
Yeah.
Tourists may be eager to experience, quote unquote, local spirits.
Yeah.
Might unknowingly be putting themselves at risk.
Wow. So it's not even just about avoiding
Right.
like dodgy looking establishments.
Exactly.
Even places that seem legit
Precisely.
might not have the same safety standards that we would expect.
Exactly. And that's where research becomes crucial before you even set foot in a new country.
Yeah.
Understanding the local alcohol culture, the regulations, even looking for online reviews can make all the difference.
That's a really good point. I've definitely been guilty of just going with the flow,
Sure.
especially on vacation.
Yeah.
But maybe that go with the flow mentality
Right.
needs a bit of a reality check,
A little bit.
especially when the stakes are higher like this.
Yeah. I mean, it's not about living in fear, but being informed enough to make smart choices.
So knowing that methanol is this potentially deadly
Yeah.
wolf in sheep's clothing,
Right.
how do we as travelers protect ourselves?
Right.
Are there any red flags that we should be looking out for beyond just
Yeah.
suspiciously cheap drinks?
Well, first off, let's talk about methanol itself.
Okay.
You mentioned it's a different kind of alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
But how different? Is it something you can taste or smell?
Right.
Or is it completely undetectable?
Yeah, that's what I'm wondering too, because if it's indistinguishable
Right.
from regular alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
that makes it even more terrifying.
That's the scary part.
Yeah.
Methanol can be incredibly difficult to detect.
Oh, wow.
It looks, smells, and even tastes similar to ethanol.
Wow.
So relying on your senses alone isn't enough.
So what can you do?
Right.
I mean,
Yeah.
you can't exactly carry a portable chemistry lab
Right.
in your backpack.
True, but there are some practical steps you can take. Sticking to bottled drinks, especially those from well-known brands,
Okay.
is a good start.
Okay.
Check the seals, make sure they haven't been tampered with.
Okay. Bottled and sealed it is.
Right.
But what about local specialties?
Right.
I mean, part of the fun of traveling is experiencing those unique drinks.
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we saying that that's totally off limits?
Not necessarily.
Okay.
It's all about calculated risks.
Okay.
If you're going to try something local, do your research.
Right.
Choose reputable establishments.
Okay.
Read reviews. Ask locals for recommendations.
Okay.
And remember, if a deal seems too good to be true,
Right.
it probably is.
All right. So be smart, be informed.
Right.
But let's say, despite all these precautions,
Mm.
someone suspects that they might have consumed methanol.
Right.
What are the signs?
Mm.
And what should they do?
Methanol poisoning symptoms can be delayed,
Oh,
sometimes appearing hours after ingestion.
so it's not like you
And that's
immediately know.
what makes it so dangerous.
Okay.
Early signs might include headache, dizziness, nausea, confusion.
Okay.
As it progresses, you might experience blurred vision, difficulty breathing, even seizures.
Wow.
The key is if you suspect methanol poisoning, don't wait.
Right.
Seek medical attention immediately.
Okay.
Time is of the essence.
This all sounds pretty grim.
It is a serious.
It makes you wonder if there's any responsibility
Right.
on the part of local authorities.
Yeah.
What's being done to regulate alcohol production and sales in Laos,
Right.
especially in tourist areas?
That's a complex issue.
Okay.
Laos has a long tradition of homemade alcohol, which is often less regulated than commercially produced spirits.
Right.
And enforcement can be challenging, particularly in rural areas
Right.
or places with limited resources.
I imagine the influx of tourism adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
It does.
Does the government have any specific measures in place to protect tourists from this kind of danger?
There are some efforts being made.
Okay.
For instance, after a similar incident a few years ago, Lao authorities launched campaigns to raise awareness about methanol poisoning
Okay.
and encourage safer drinking practices.
Okay, so at least they're trying to do something.
The reality is, in a developing country like Laos,
Right.
with limited resources and a complex cultural landscape, it's an uphill battle.
So it sounds like traveler awareness
Absolutely.
and personal responsibility are even more critical in a place like Laos.
Absolutely. And this applies not just to Laos, but to any destination where alcohol production and sales might not be as tightly regulated as what we're accustomed to. It's about being proactive, doing your homework, and advocating for your own safety.
You mentioned advocating for our own safety.
Right.
What does that look like in practice? I mean, beyond the obvious steps, like choosing drinks carefully and knowing the emergency contact numbers.
It's about engaging in informed conversations,
Okay.
both before and during your trip.
Okay.
Talk to locals, ask questions about the local alcohol culture, and share your concerns about safety.
Okay.
Encourage your fellow travelers to do the same.
Right.
And if you see something that seems unsafe or suspicious, don't be afraid to report it to the authorities.
So it's about being a responsible traveler.
Exactly.
Not just for ourselves, but for others as well.
Travel is a privilege.
Yeah.
And with that privilege comes a responsibility to be mindful and respectful and proactive in ensuring our safety and the safety of others.
So we've talked about the dangers of methanol, the difficulty in detecting it, and the importance of traveler responsibility. But what about the bigger picture? This incident in Laos, while tragic, is just one example of the potential risks we face in an increasingly interconnected world. How do we balance the desire for authentic travel experiences with the need for personal safety in a globalized world?
That's a profound question, and one that doesn't have an easy answer.
Right.
But I think a key part of it is recognizing that authenticity doesn't have to come at the expense of safety.
So it's not about avoiding all risks or sticking to tourist traps.
Exactly.
But rather about being informed and making conscious choices.
Precisely.
Okay.
It's about doing your research, understanding the potential risks, and then deciding what level of risk you're comfortable with.
And maybe that level of risk varies.
Absolutely.
Depending on the destination, your personal travel style, and even your own health conditions.
Absolutely. What might be an acceptable risk for one person could be completely unacceptable for another.
Yeah.
There's no one-size-fits-all approach to travel safety.
You know, this conversation has taken some unexpected turns.
It has.
We started by talking about a specific incident, but it's clear that this issue has much broader implications.
Yeah.
We're talking about globalization, cultural awareness, and the need for informed decision-making in an increasingly complex world.
And that's what makes this so fascinating. This deep dive into methanol poisoning has uncovered layers of interconnected issues that extend far beyond a single tragic event.
All right, so we've got a lot to think about here.
Yeah, you do.
We've discussed the immediate dangers, the importance of personal responsibility, and even the broader implications of globalization.
Right.
But what about practical advice for travelers,
Okay.
what are some concrete steps we can take
Sure.
to minimize our risks and stay safe
Okay.
while still embracing the joy of travel?
Yeah, it feels like we've gone from like this micro view to a macro view in this conversation.
It really has.
Starting with this awful incident in Laos, and now we're talking about navigating risks in like this interconnected world. It's a lot to process. So
practically speaking, where do we go from here?
Yeah, it's about empowering yourself with knowledge.
Okay.
And honestly, a healthy dose of skepticism.
Okay.
You mentioned travel advisories earlier.
Right.
Those can be a good starting point, but they're often broad strokes.
Right.
Dig deeper.
So beyond the usual, like checking those travel advisories, packing a first aid kit,
Sure.
what else should people be doing?
Think like an investigator.
Okay.
Read recent travel blogs, scan forums for on-the-ground experiences. Even search social media for specific locations you're planning to visit.
Yeah.
It's amazing what insights you can find when you go beyond those glossy brochures.
That's smart. It's like crowdsourcing your safety intel.
Exactly.
That's
And once you're there, engage with locals in a respectful way.
Right.
Bartenders, hotel staff, even that friendly family running a street food stall.
Yeah.
They can be invaluable sources of information.
But what about like the language barrier?
Right.
I've been in situations where even with the best intentions,
Sure.
communication is tough.
Absolutely. So that's where preparation comes in.
Okay.
Learn a few key phrases in the local language.
Okay.
Like safe drink, dangerous hospital.
Right.
Even if your pronunciation is shaky, the effort shows respect. And you might be surprised how much people understand.
That's a good point. It's about going beyond the basic tourist level of interaction.
Exactly. And don't underestimate the power of observation.
Right.
Pay attention to what locals are drinking, where they're going. Are there places that seem to be avoided?
Okay.
Are there certain drinks everyone orders this? Those cues can tell you a lot.
It's like that old saying, when in Rome.
Exactly.
But with a safety-conscious twist.
Right.
Yeah, okay.
And let's be real, sometimes your gut feeling is the best indicator. If a situation feels off, if a place seems sketchy or a drink smells or tastes wrong, trust your instincts.
Okay, so we've got the practical tips down, but what about the mental and emotional side of things?
Right.
This whole methanol incident, it's bound to make people anxious about traveling.
Of course, it's natural to feel a sense of vulnerability, especially when confronted with these kinds of risks.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these incidents, while tragic, are statistically rare.
Okay.
Millions of people travel safely every year.
So it's about finding that balance between acknowledging the risks.
Exactly.
But not letting fear paralyze us.
Precisely. And that's where perspective comes in.
Okay.
We tend to fixate on the negative headlines.
Right.
But there are countless stories of positive, enriching travel experiences.
Yeah.
Focusing on those, sharing those, can help counterbalance the anxiety.
You know, as we wrap up this deep dive, I'm struck by how this conversation has evolved. We started with this specific incident in Laos.
We did.
But we've ended up exploring this whole philosophy of travel in the modern world.
And I think that's the takeaway here. This isn't just about avoiding bad booze in Laos.
Right.
It's about cultivating a mindset of informed travel.
Right.
No matter where you go.
Informed, engaged.
Yes.
And a little bit skeptical.
A little bit.
That's our recipe for safe and fulfilling travel.
Well said.
Just.
So, to our listener, as you plan your next adventure, remember, knowledge is power. Empower yourself, stay curious, and travel well.
And until next time, happy and safe travels, everyone.